Okay, so we're going to go into studying a bit about the Feast of New Wine, because I know that this is something that is quite unfamiliar. Not only are you learning already about all the different feasts, like the Passover, the Feast of Weeks, plus the Atonement and the Feast of Tabernacle, which are pretty common, and you can find a lot of material on if you were to go online and search out about that. But the Feast of New Wine and the Feast of New Oil are celebrations that we ourselves only started, or we rediscovered, I guess, a few years back as we looked into the Zadok calendar. Like I said, Mark said there are quite a number of slides on this, but the first section of this teaching is about the significance of offering the first fruits and giving our best to Yahuwah. Obviously, in the time of Israel, they were an agricultural society, and all the offerings of the temple were linked to the harvest of the field, and the blessing that Yah gives is a blessing to the land. So if you go back to the promise that Yahweh gave to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the promise is that they would be a multitude, they would be a great nation. But the other one would be that they would be receiving a land where they would prosper. And so the blessing that Yah gives is the blessing of the harvest of the grain, the wine, and the oil. And many others, of course, is the blessings of the sheep, the cattle, etc. But the condition to all of that is that, of course, Israel would put Yahuwah as a priority, and that all the first fruits would be first dedicated to Yah, so that the rest would be accepted and the rest would prosper. So the priority is, yes, he holds his covenant, he is faithful to his covenant, but on the other hand, the response of Israel to the covenant is that they obey the command to bring him first, the first fruits offering, so that the rest would be atoned for, in a sense, be covered. So there are many commandments to bring in the first fruits. I won't go through all of them. They're in the slides. You can go through them because, again, we have 40 slides on this, but they are about not delaying to give to Yahuwah every ripe fruit of the corn, the wine, the oil, the sheep, etc. So Deuteronomy 18:4, Exodus 22:29, as well as Jubilees chapter 7. We see the first fruits of your land you shall bring into the house of Yahuwah your Elohim in Exodus 33:19, Deuteronomy 26:10. And now, behold, I have brought the first fruits of the land which you, O Yahuwah, have given me, and you shall set it before Yahuwah your Elohim and worship before Yahuwah your Elohim. Leviticus 23 also outlines this with regards to the Feast of Weeks. So, in quick summary, the first fruits is taken from the land that Yahuwah gave. He gave the land. It is taken from the first fully ripe fruits of the land, and it is offered to him. Then it is offered to him, and it is kept in the storehouses of the temple. And then it is also used for the priest to partake of that before Elohim on the day that it is brought to them, so that the rest of the people can start eating it. So if you remember, when we talked about Shavuot, we talked about the fact that the people were not allowed to touch of the grain until it had been offered. So even though they have a new harvest, they can't partake of that new grain until it is brought to the temple, and it is, in essence, it is dedicated, it is made holy, it's made kadosh for Yah, and then only the people can partake of it. The command to keep the Feast of New Wine and the Feast of New Oil is not found explicitly in the Torah, but it is found in the temple scrolls, which are part of the different manuscripts that were found in the Dead Sea Scrolls in Qumran in 1947. So the rediscovery of these scrolls made us think of how the people of Israel at different times found different portions of scriptures or different parts of the law. And then as they rediscovered those laws, they started to obey. So in a sense, the discovery of the temple scrolls is almost like this, where you discovered certain things that, wow, we didn't know that this is what was practiced by the priests. And so, you know, we can ask ourselves, is this something that we are supposed to continue on as well? The text in the temple scrolls is confirmed in the book of Jubilees, and the theme of the Feast of Wine can be seen interwoven throughout the biblical text. So a lot of people will say, who are studying the calendar, and there are people who oppose the Zadok calendar and continue to maintain the Jewish lunar calendar and say, you don't find any commandment to celebrate the Feast of New Wine. There's no commandment to keep the Feast of New Oil explicitly. But we saw just now that there are commandments to bring the first fruits of the corn, the wine, and the oil, that all three need to be brought to the temple. So at some point, the priest is going to have to make a dedication of those portion of the harvest unto Yahuwah. And then we see in throughout the scriptures, like I said, hints of the fact that the people did make this either a celebration, that it was something of significance. Okay, so in essence, we are left with the hints, and it's up to us, I guess, to bring the conclusion to a conclusion in prayer. These are the texts from the temple scrolls of all the different offerings that need to be brought. Actually, this was also detailed in the text that I posted in the Telegram group earlier this week. But I want to focus on the last bullet point on this slide, on the temple scroll text in yellow. It says, after them, the whole people, from the great to the small, shall begin to drink the new wine. They shall not eat any unripe grapes from the vine, for on this day they shall expiate for the tirosh. So that means they atone for it. In a sense, they partake of it so that they would not sin against Yah by partaking of it without giving thanks to him. The children of Israel shall rejoice before Yahuwah, an eternal rule for their generations wherever they dwell. They shall rejoice on this day, for they have begun to pour out an intoxicating drink offering, the new wine, on the altar of Yahuwah year by year. So, of course, you can, using a grammatical term, conjugate the term first fruits into many different ways. We can look at the literal level, where you actually bring grapes and you bring new wine into his presence. And then you have to also look into the other layers. What does it actually mean to bring new wine? What is the significance of the new wine? So one of the things that we do want to make sure of is that we offer the fruit in our lives, we offer obedience. That is the fruit of our lives, obedience to him. The fact that he has sown the word into us, the fruit of the word the outcome of it should be obedience. So when Yahuwah gives us instructions more than once on a subject, it would be prudent to listen. There are many scriptures where Yahuwah instructs the giving of our first fruits to him. So do we really understand them? And most importantly, do we need to even observe these days any longer? There is no longer a temple in which to bring these fruits, and most of us today don't grow our own food. We merely get our produce from the market. So I know that Joseph brought a box of grapes that's purchased from the market. Hopefully one day we will have our own grapes to offer. So it makes us think, what's the significance of all of this? And then somebody had commented in the past, do you cultivate grapes for wine? Don't you need a temple and a priest to make offerings as well? Not everything can be applied. So if that were the case, then we don't celebrate the Passover. We don't celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles either, since there's no temple. But for us, we are looking at what is the significance of this? How do we celebrate this as a memorial? What does it point towards? Because every time, for what we have seen in the last 11 years of searching the scriptures and trying to apply the commandments of Yah and trying to search the feast, we have found that as we apply the feast, we have to wrestle with the word. We have to wrestle with what it means. We have to look into how do we actually apply this? And in the process of doing that, we find different scriptures that tie with each other, and we find the way, the teaching that is beneath it, the learning that we need to get from it is through the fact that we are actually trying to apply, and we're not reading somebody else's commentary. We ourselves are living through it, and therefore we can come to a conclusion and understanding of ourselves by the leading of the Holy Spirit. In the past, Israel did obey in bringing in their first fruits. In this page, I said, we note that Israel did not always have the scrolls of the law with them. Some of them they discovered in part, and whatever they read, the kings were convicted and called the people to obey. In 2 Chronicles chapter 31, verse 15, it says, and as soon as the commandment came abroad the children of Israel brought in abundance the first fruits of corn, wine, and oil, and honey, and of all the increase of the field, and the tithe of all things brought they in abundantly. This is what Hezekiah did faithfully in his reforms, cleansing Israel and Judah of their idols, and calling on all the tribes to come and celebrate the feast of the Passover. He restored the temple system, including the tithing. In verse 11 of that passage, it says, then Hezekiah commanded to prepare the chambers in the house of Yahweh, and they prepared them. And you'll see this same parallel with regards to restoration, that when somehow Israel had been led astray, they were away from the commandments, and then they find that they discovered that they went away from the commandments, and the commandments are read to them again. They are prompted to obey, and things are restored back in their proper order. So the temple is restored back in order. The priests are cleansed. The chambers are prepared. And we see this as well in Nehemiah chapter 13. It says, why is the house of Elohim forsaken? And I gathered them together and set them in their place. Then brought all Judah the tithe of the corn and the new wine and the oil unto the treasuries. And the treasuries refer to the chambers of the temple. And I made treasurers over the treasuries, Shelemiah the priest and Zadok the scribe, and of the Levites, Pedaiah. And next to them was Hanan, the son of Zakur, the son of Mattaniah, for they were counted faithful, and their office was to distribute unto their brethren. Remember me, O Elohai, concerning this, and wipe not out my good deeds that I have done for the house of my Elohim and for the offices thereof. So it's interesting that, number one, there is a restoration. What it means to take care of Yah's house, it means restore the tithe of the fruit of the land. Number two, restore the storehouses. Number three, restore the proper management service of the temples with its treasures, because the people that oversaw the treasures of the temple ended up distributing those treasures back to the people. So we're laying this out because this is Yah's government. If you think of the government that we have today, oppose that or contrast that to the way that Yah wants his government to work. That when we have from the land, we put into the temple, and then whatever is stored up in the temple is partaken of by the priest, but also it is distributed over to those who are in need. So this was considered good works. This is considered good works. So the Levites are taken care of. Their presence. So the Levites taken care of meant that their presence and focus in teaching the law to the people and offering sacrifices on behalf of the people. Okay, so this is restoring the temple back. Everything works, I guess, with perfect order in Yah's economy, with everyone being taken care of. Yah promises to keep us and bless us if we listen to his commandments. So I'm not going to go through all of these different verses, but the idea here is that nothing wrong happens to us when we are walking in obedience, at least when we are fully tested. And it shall come to pass, because you hearken to these ordinances and keep and do them, that Yahweh your Elohim shall keep with you the covenant and the mercy which he swore to your fathers. And he will love you and bless you and multiply you. He will also bless the fruit of your womb and the fruit of your land, your corn, your wine, your oil, the increase of your kine, and the flocks of your sheep, in the land which he swore unto your fathers to give you. All right, so quickly, Yah gives us the land, or gives the people the land. They follow his commandments. He in turn keeps his covenant and blesses the land where he has placed them. So now just to focus a little bit on the first fruit of wine itself. When does it happen and what is it about? We know that it's 7 weeks from the time that the grain is offered. So we had Shavuot 7 weeks ago. And so now we have the first fruit of new wine. 7 weeks from now will be the harvest, technically the harvest of olives. And they will press the olives and they will offer the first fruit of the olives to Yahuwah. You shall count 7 weeks from the day when you bring the new grain offering to Yahuwah, the bread of the first fruit. 7 full Sabbaths shall elapse until you have counted 50 days. To the morrow of the 7th Sabbath, you shall bring new wine for a drink offering, 4 hins from all the tribes of Israel, 1/3 of a hin for each tribe. So this is part of the temple scroll. It's not found in your text, in the Torah text. So the first Sunday of the 5th month, today, the 3rd day of the 5th month, is the day of the Feast of First Fruits. Now, looking at what this means to offer wine, so we look into the significance of the wine itself. We look at some definitions. There are two words that are used in the Hebrew to refer to wine. It's translated both as wine in the English, but tirosh and yayin are the two words. Tirosh specifically refers to the new wine, the sweet wine, the fresh wine that is pressed from the grapes. It ferments very quickly. I think Mark posted this morning, is it today or last night, about the wine press in Israel. But the first few days, it takes just a few days for fermentation to happen and for alcoholic content to even start being in the wine itself. So tirosh refers to that new wine. It is sweet, and when you say unfermented, it's just very low fermentation, freshly pressed, which is expulsed and squeezed out. Yayin refers to fermented old wine, easily intoxicating. Kashar, you're asking about the new wine and the new wineskin. So you put new wine into new wineskin because the fermentation process causes the wineskin to expand. And as a result, if it is old wineskin, it will break through the fermentation process. So you don't put new wine in old wineskin. Put new wine into new wineskin so that there is enough room for the wine to expand. So two things, one thing is that tirosh symbolizes joy and abundance. It cheers Elohim and man. So we take a look at a few scriptures here. In Judges chapter 9, verse 13, it says, the vine said unto them, should I leave my wine which cheers Elohim and man and go to be promoted over the trees? Psalm 4, verse 7 says, you have put gladness in my heart more than in the time that their corn and their wine increased. Joel chapter 2, verse 19 says, yea, Yahuwah will answer and say unto his people, behold, I will send you corn, wine, and oil, and you shall be satisfied therewith, and I will no more make you a reproach among the heathen. Zechariah 9, verse 17, for how great is your goodness, and how great is his beauty. Corn shall make the young men cheerful, and new wine the maids. So I guess new wine is for young ladies. The absence of it is symbolic of judgment and curse. So the fact that Yah removes the corn and the wine and the oil is a sign of his judgment upon the land. Versus when it is in abundance, it is his blessing over the land. Joel chapter 1, verse 10, the field is wasted, the land mourns, for the corn is wasted, the new wine is dried up, the oil languishes. Micah chapter 6, verse 5, you shall sow, but you shall not reap. You shall tread the olives, but you shall not anoint you with oil, and sweet wine, but you shall not drink wine. So that is judgment upon the people when these things are removed. Then there are many hints to the fact that the time of the new wine corresponds to the wedding season. I guess maybe because the wine is in abundance at that time, so that's a good time to celebrate and to make, and it's, new wine, meaning that it's not going to be, people are not going to be too drunk, or at least they're not going to be too intoxicated too fast. So there are a lot of symbolisms that we find. It is very likely to be the time of the confirmation of the covenant. Okay, so if we go back to Exodus chapter 19, this is when Israel is brought for the first time before the mountain, before Mount Sinai, and Yahuwah tells them to sanctify themselves at the mountain for 3 days, to wash themselves and to not go near any women. And he says, he gives them an instruction verbally. He says, if you will obey my voice and you will listen to my commands, then you will be to me a holy people, a royal priesthood, a set apart nation. So this is the text, I guess, or the promise that they agreed to. So Israel said, yes, we will do everything that you say. And then Moses goes up. So he's with them for a certain amount of time. We know that he is with them for 6 days, I think, because he was first in the cloud for 6 days and then goes up to the mountain, and he is there for 40 days and 40 nights. So technically it's, we could say it's about 50 days, 40 days, 40 plus days that he's there on the mountain. And then he comes back down, and he comes back down with the tablets of stone. And the purpose of the tablets of stone was to confirm this covenant, because the people of Israel had agreed to it verbally. Now you're going to have the ketubah. You're going to have the written agreement. And if you've probably seen if you can actually research it real quick, you can look for ketubah on Google, and you will find this is the writing, is the law, the marriage contract that is signed between the bride and the groom. And so the marriage contract is being brought down by Moses, and it would very well correspond to today, to the day of the Feast of New Wine. But instead of confirmation, what happened was the breaking of the covenant, right? Because the people of Israel said, we don't know where this Moses is. Our leaders has gone somewhere else. We have no idea what has happened to him. Let's not continue with him. Let's just go ahead and do our own thing and set up our own golden calf, right? So Aaron says, tomorrow is a feast unto Yahweh. So is it a coincidence that he says that? Is it that he established his own feast? Or did he know that it is actually the day of the new wine, and he decided that he was going to do things his own way? So adultery happens. There's a breaking of the covenant that happens. And the people, instead of drinking the new wine, or the wine of the agreement of the covenant, the agreement to the marriage, they end up drinking the bitter water of adultery. If you remember in Numbers chapter 5, there is the priest actually he burns something, and then he puts those ashes into the water, and then the wife that is accused of being in adultery has to drink that water. And here he grinds the golden calf and makes the people drink that water. We could call it the water of jealousy. So what is interesting is that at the time of the Passover, Messiah tells his disciples, he takes the covenant, he takes the Passover with them. Matthew 26, verse 29, he says, I tell you, I will not drink again of this fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom. And so we may miss on the fact that he says, I will drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom. Is he hinting here to the Feast of New Wine and to, therefore, the marriage supper of the Lamb, right? Because in my Father's kingdom, at the marriage supper, is when I will come, you will come and be with me, and we'll drink of the wine together. The wine is symbolic of the Hadash, the renewed covenant of restoration between the bride and her kinsman redeemer. It was no mistake that the first sign of his manifestation, of Messiah's manifestation, was at the wedding of at Cana. And that first miracle that he did was a transformation of water into wine, right? And it's at a wedding, right? So it's the embodiment of the two becoming one. It's the embodiment of a celebration of joy. That's when he presents himself. So could it be that he will show himself again to us at the time of the wedding? Psalm 128, which I read earlier, it's the vine and the bride. Blessed is everyone that fears Yahweh, that walks in his ways. Well, just look at verse 3. Your wife shall be as a fruitful vine. The wife is linked to the vine. And then your children like olive plants. And so the children are linked now to the oil, to the fruit of the olives. And so you think of the word actually in the Hebrew would make more sense to us, because the word for oil in Hebrew is shemen. Shemen is where we get the word semen from. So we can have the parallel there of the children being the fruit of the marriage. So the marriage is confirmed and it is consummated to bring forth children. So we can see here, there's so many different, like I said, hints in the scriptures, things that can help us put the puzzle together. Songs of Solomon, wine and the wedding. The wine represents the love of the bridegroom for the bride. Songs 1 verse 2 says his love is better than wine, but so is her love to him. Songs of Solomon chapter 4 verse 10. He will extol your love more than wine. The bride refers to herself as a vineyard not well kept. So Israel, the bride, is like a vineyard that is meant to bear great fruit and that will be treaded to produce good wine. And so it's supposed to produce good wine. So it is either going to be Israel bringing forth joy, or it is Israel bringing forth wrath to Yah, because the wine can also be a symbol of wrath. And so if there is joy when there is marriage, but there's also judgment if there is adultery, if there is disobedience to his commands. So the abundance of fruit in the garden is symbolic of the beauty of the bride, the bridegroom, their love, and their coming union. Characteristics of the vineyard, it should not be sown with diverse seeds. There should only be one type of seed. You shall not sow your vineyard with diverse seed, lest your fruit, the fruit of your seed which you have sown, and the fruit of the vineyard be defiled. Because if a seed is defiled, it must be cut off. In Jubilee 16, we're told that Lot's seed was cut off because it was contaminated, right? So there was incest there, and therefore Lot's generation was, cut off from the lineage of Messiah. The wife is the one sown with seeds. No mixed seed is allowed. And then Naomi had mentioned Judges 21 in our Telegram group today. Let's take a look at that, because it is also interesting that, again, it is wedding, the symbolism of wedding, and tied with the harvest of grapes. And the congregation sent there 12,000 men of the most valiant, and commanded them, saying, go and smite the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead with the edge of the sword, with the women and the children. And this is the thing that you shall do. You shall utterly destroy every male and every woman that has lain by men. And they found among the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead 400 young virgins that had known no man by lying with any male. And they brought them unto the camp to Shiloh, which is in the land of Canaan. Then they said, behold, there is a feast of Yahweh in Shiloh, yearly, in a place which is on the north side of Bethel, on the east side of the highway that goes up from Bethel to Shechem, and on the south of Lebonah. Therefore, they commanded the children of Benjamin, saying, go and lie in wait in the vineyards, and see, and behold, if the daughters of Shiloh come out to dance in dances, then come ye out of the vineyards, and catch you every man his wife of the daughters of Shiloh, and go to the land of Benjamin. So we note that there are 12,000 men appointed to destroy the men and women that did not join themselves with the tribes of Israel. So are these 12,000 men symbolic of the 144,000 that would come later? Because 144,000 is 12 times 12,000 men. We note also that the scriptures tell us that there is a yearly feast unto Yahweh. So it is a yearly celebration recorded in the scriptures that happens at the time of the grapes being ripe. And then they come and dance in the vineyards. The women come and dance with the vineyards. And then what is interesting too is the Benjamites come out. They come out like thieves to snatch the virgins away to make them their brides. Could this be reminiscing of Yahusha coming down to take away at the resurrection his bride, his people, to the marriage supper of the Lamb? So there are some symbolisms here that we cannot overlook. And then the wedding at Cana that I mentioned earlier. It is interesting that in John chapter 2, verse 1, we are just told, and the third day there was a marriage in Cana. So the third, and it doesn't give us any context of to what this third day from something, third day of the week, third day of the month. What is this referring to? But what is interesting is that the third day of the fifth month is the Feast of New Wine. And is it interesting that, of course, it's a wedding, and that Yahusha did a miracle of transforming water into wine. Again, we can't make a law out of this, but it is very interesting that there is a hint of this in the Gospels. Then we look into Revelation chapter 19, directly into the marriage supper of the Lamb. It says, let us be glad and rejoice and give honor to him, for the marriage of the Lamb is come, and his wife has made herself ready. And to her was granted that she should be arrayed in fine linen, clean and white, for the fine linen is the righteousness of the saints. And he said unto me, Write, blessed are they which are called unto the marriage supper of the Lamb. And he says unto me, These are the true sayings of Elohim. So who are the righteous but those who carry out the commandments of Yah? The saints can carry out the commandments when they are taught right by their teachers, by the scribes. Yahusha, our faithful high priest, teaches us well. Who is granted to wear fine, clean, and white linen? The Levites. When was that privilege given to them? When they chose to walk with Yah rather than their own sinful brethren. So in Exodus chapter 32, those that did not defile themselves at the golden calf were set apart, were taken away, and they were brought to the mountain, and they are the ones that were given the right to wear the fine linen of the priesthood and to teach their brethren. The new wine represents the joy of union between the lamb and the bride. The bridegroom brings her into his chambers. He comes and takes her away before he pours out the cup of his wrath over the unrighteous. So the opposite of the joy that we see in the marriage is the judgment of Yah when he comes in to tread the winepress. So in Exodus chapter 32, we see this. I'm not going to go over it again, but interesting to note that in Exodus 32, verse 18, in the Septuagint, it says, Moses says, It is not the voice of them that begin the battle that I hear, nor the voice of them that begin the cry of defeat, but the voice of them that begin the banquet of wine. So in the King James, the Masoretic text, this is rendered, is the noise of them that sing that I hear. So this is a time most likely of separation and judgment as well. Moses stood in the gate of the camp and said, Who is on Yahuwah's side? Let him come unto me. And all the sons of Levi gathered themselves together unto him. And he said to them, Thus says Yahuwah Elohim of Israel, Put every man his sword by his side, and go in and out from gate to gate throughout the camp, and slay every man his brother, and every man his companion, and every man his neighbor. And the children of Levi did according to the word of Moses. And there fell of the people that day about 3,000 men. For Moses had said, Consecrate yourselves today to Yahuwah, every man upon his son and upon his brother, that he may bestow upon you a blessing this day. And it came to pass on the morrow that Moses said to the people, You have sinned a great sin, and now I will go up unto Yahuwah. Peradventure, I shall make an atonement for your sin. Okay, so here it is a separation, a consecration of the Levites that followed the commandments of Yah, and it's a destruction of those that committed adultery. And I've mentioned this in my some of my messages this week, was that 3,000 men died, destroyed on that day when at the golden calf, and at the time of the outpouring of the Holy Spirit in Acts chapter 2, 3,000 men were added. And it's interesting that in Acts chapter 2, we are told that the disciples were being accused of being drunk on new wine. There's no new wine at the time of Shavuot, at the time of the Feast of Grain. That's already 1-year-old wine, almost 1-year-old wine, and that would be old wine. It is not fresh wine. So they are not talking about old wine here. They're saying you are drunk on new wine. Why would they say you are drunk on new wine if there was no new wine available then? So could it be that they were actually gathered together for the confirmation of the ketubah, for the confirmation of the covenant at that time? And that's when the Holy Spirit fell upon them, and 3,000 men were added to them, just as 3,000 died, 2,000, well, maybe about 2,000 years prior at the time of Moses. Okay, so we talked about the marriage supper being a time of rejoicing, but the marriage supper in Revelation is also a time of judgment. And it says, And I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse, and he sat upon him who called him, and he that sat upon him was called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he does judge and make war. His eyes were as a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns. He had a name written that no man knew but himself, and he was clothed with a vesture dipped in blood, right? So this is symbolic of him treading the winepress, and he's getting, all the stains from the wine, but it's also symbolic of the blood of judgment. and his name is called the Word of Elohim. And the armies which were in heaven followed him upon white horses, clothed in fine linen, white and clean. And out of his mouth goes a sharp sword, that with it he should smite the nations, and he shall rule them with a rod of iron. And he treads the winepress of the fierceness and wrath of Almighty Elohim. And he has on his vesture and on his thigh a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Then verse 17, and I saw an angel standing in the sun, and he cried with a loud voice, saying to all the fowls that fly in the midst of heaven, come and gather yourselves together unto the supper of the great Elohim, that he may eat the flesh of kings, and the flesh of captains, and the flesh of mighty men, and the flesh of horses, and them that sit on them, and all the flesh, and the flesh of all men, both free and bond, small and great. And I saw the beast and the kings of the earth, and their armies gathered together to make war against him that sat on the horse and against his army. And the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet, which wrought miracles before him, with which he deceived them that had received the mark of the beast, and them that worshipped his image. These both were cast alive into a lake of fire burned with brimstone. And the remnant were slain with the sword of him that sat upon the horse, which sword proceeded out of his mouth, and all the fowls were filled with their flesh. So if you read Revelation 19, you will see both the passage on the marriage supper and those that are set apart for the marriage supper. And on the other hand, those that are outside that are judged as he treads the winepress. So again, it's the whole idea of the wine can be both of rejoicing or of judgment. So the time of the Feast of New Wine is either you are confirming the covenant with him, or you are walking in adultery and being destroyed. Okay, so real quick, it's interesting. This is something that, for me, I don't fully understand what this means, this verse in Revelation chapter 6, verse 6, but it started to make sense, or at least, my attention got sparked a little bit because of understanding the new wine and the new oil celebrations in the temple scrolls. Revelation chapter 6, verse 6 says, and I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts say, a measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny, and see that you do not hurt the oil and the wine. To the third horseman, it is said, do not touch the oil and the wine. There is a covering, a protection made, possibly on the Feast of Oil and the Feast of New Wine. Spiritually speaking, what does it mean? So if, I don't know if we had shared this before, but the barley, when Messiah meets Thomas, that's the day of the waving of the wave sheaf. And you see that Thomas's faith is a faith that is very raw. It's very, I want to see, I want to touch, then I believe. And then 50 days later, there's a maturing that has happened with the disciples. They're now ready to even, preach the gospel to those that are surrounding, and not 50 days, it's going to be much later, I guess, now that I understand this better. So take that back. So we are seeing the wheat is actually ground finely to be made into bread, and it's symbolic of the houses of Israel coming to that place of having been crushed and ready to be, having been harvested. They're mature, they're harvested, and they're ready to be offered as bread for Elohim. And then later on is the new wine, those that have been have matured to that place of new wine. And to me, the symbolic of the Levites, those that are able to make a certain separation between what is adulterous and what is actually of the covenant, those that want to confirm the covenant with Yah. And then the oil is those that are in true deep fellowship Elohim, because that's when the oil is symbolic of, if you think of Moses and how he went to the mountain and his face shone, and his face was shining. You know that in the scriptures it says that oil is to make man's face to shine. And so there's a symbolic of a deep communion with Elohim, which is also symbolized in the consummation of the marriage. So it could be that there are different levels of maturity that are displayed in the different types of harvests. So leave the barley and the wheat behind. Those that are mature, that are walking close with me, that are willing to separate themselves and willing to be in communion with me, those I keep. So he says in Isaiah chapter 26, verse 20, come, my people, enter you into your chambers and shut your doors about you hide yourself for a little while until the indignation be overpassed. So this happens when Yahuwah comes out of his place, and as he had said to Moses that he'd come to visit, he would come and visit the inhabitants of the earth. Okay, I think I've covered pretty much, the most important aspects of this feast, the whole aspect of joy and judgment. I think in conclusion, what's important in this season, as we are discovering all of these things, is that he is wanting to restore things to us. It's a time of restoration. I'm not just the only one saying this. I'm reading this of other people who are recognizing that Yah is restoring wonderful things to us. And so we are to be the people that want to see the restoration and want to put things back into order, just like Nehemiah did. And so the question is whether that is our true desire. Are we really wanting these feasts, or are these a burden? Are these a drag for us? Or are we wanting to see this being celebrated again by all of Yah's people? Do we make the time for this? Do we allocate time for the celebrations of these feasts? Or do we say, no, we don't want these. These have been done away with, and no point in carrying on with this. But if you look at the scriptures, this is what Lamentations chapter 1 verse 4 says, the roads to Zion mourn, for no one comes to her appointed feasts. Lamentations 2:6, Yahuwah has made Zion forget her appointed feasts and her Sabbaths. Lamentations 2 verse 12, they say to their mothers, where is bread and wine? Joel chapter 1 verse 9, the food offering and the drink offering are cut off from the house of Yahuwah. The priests, Yahuwah's ministers, mourn. The field is wasted, the land mourns, for the grain is wasted, the new wine is dried up, the oil tree droops. Zephaniah 3 verse 18, I will gather you who mourn for the appointed feasts. So are we mourning for those appointed feasts? Do we desire for them to be restored? Or is our heart towards carrying on with our own ways and not necessarily even searching into this to find out what is it that you desire? So it is actually a great blessing to be restored to the feasts of Yahuwah. We could sing joyfully because Yah is revealing these things to us again. All right, so I'm going to stop here for today. If you have any thoughts or questions, maybe some things that you yourself have read or you have discovered during this time, happy to hear from everyone.